Hello, and welcome to tonight's live bibliotherapy session, which is going to be all about seasonal reading. What is seasonal reading? Why would you do it? And how do you go about it? Seasonal reading is the idea that you read different books at different times of the year. You read in tune with the seasons. And I started thinking about this um, particularly recently because last week I did a session all about what to read during autumn. And I delved into the different things that you might want to read in autumn, thinking about books that would store up the sunshine from the summer to keep you warm over the winter months ahead. Books that would help you to prepare for winter by helping you to ponder the joys of the summer season that you've just had and the winter to come. Books that would be great to hibernate with and to hunker down, to get cozy and hide under a duvet with, possibly with a candle by a fire if you can. And also books that would be celebrating colour, because autumn is such a wonderful, colourful time of year. So, thinking about all the different aspects of autumn and autumn reading made me think further about seasonal reading generally. And hi, great to see you all here this evening. Clickety Croaker, Cyber Flaneurs, Laughing John, fantastic to see you all, and others joining on Facebook as we speak. So, seasonal reading, folks, I wonder if it's something that you've ever thought about or even tried to do yourselves. The other reason that I started thinking about it more deeply is also because I had the joy of coming across this beautiful book, which is called The Literary Almanac, A Year of Seasonal Reading by Francesca Bowman. And this is a beautiful book. As you can see, it's got gorgeous illustrations in it, which is written as a book to accompany you through the seasons, giving you different suggestions of what books to read at different times of the year. So I'm going to talk you through some of the ideas in this book. But before I do that, and before I talk about various books that I think are great for particular seasons of the year, I'm also going to talk to you about an idea that I wrote about in my book, The Art of Mindful Reading, which is a book, if you are not familiar with it, which is all about ways of getting more out of your reading and ways of reading more deeply and ways of enjoying your own reading in different forms and formats, sharing it with friends, and perhaps giving it away, sorting out your library, and even doing a bit of seasonal reading. So there is a little bit about it in this lovely book. And I'm just going to read you a little bit about the idea of a golden treasury. All will become clear. Create a golden treasury. As a mindful reader, a magical and nourishing exercise is to create a golden treasury of your favourite writers, poets, and thinkers. A golden treasury is an idea that dates back to the 19th century and Francis Turner Palgrave, who created one of the most loved books of all time, The Golden Treasury of Poems, from Shakespeare to the present. Palgrave was a British cricket anthologist and poet who compiled a volume containing what he considered to be the finest poetry in history, from Shakespeare to Spenser, Wordsworth, and Coleridge. Palgrave was a great friend of Tennyson, and legend has it that they read aloud the work of famous poets, deciding to include all the poems that passed muster from the reading aloud process. Since the first edition, the book has been continually updated and revised, and there have been 6 new editions under Palgrave's name. Your task as a mindful reader is to create your own golden treasury of all the books you've loved most in your life. First, choose a suitable book to turn into your treasury. Choose a large volume that can cope with having paper stuck into it with glue, the kind of book that you might use for scrapbooking. It could have brown paper as a background, or it could be a ring binder that will expand happily as you stick things in. Get it as big as you dare so that you can stick a lot in. And this is something that all of you might think about doing. It might be a really lovely thing to do in the winter months ahead. Choosing your books. Decorate the cover in any style you like, adding the title A Golden Treasury. Then start thinking about what you would like to put in it. What are your favourite books from childhood? If you still have them, browse around your earliest books and choose the ones you love the best. I then talk about all of that, which I won't go into because I want to talk about seasonal reading. But I'll just talk a little bit about decorating it because that will become relevant. Meanwhile, I'm going to have to take off my winter hat, which is there as a prop, but that's actually really hot. And look what it's doing to my hair. Might have to put it back on again in a minute. That's all part of my dressing up with seasonal themes. As you can see, I've got a bit of autumn, bit of winter, bit of summer, bit of spring. Decorating the treasury. Decorate the pages with your own illustrations or with pictures from magazines, wrapping paper, craft paper, or anything that takes your fancy. Put time and love into this project, choosing paper, paints, colours, and textures that you will delight in over the years. Whenever you go back to the treasury in the future, you will remember choosing those papers and the act of creation, and this will feed back into the love of the stories and poems, extracts and quotations that you have chosen. Find different ways of presenting the extracts on the page. Some could be written on white paper, others could be white pen on black, or copies that are then stuck onto brown paper. You can even print onto acetate and have a poem, passage, or quote overlaying another one. Once you've chosen all your passages, spend an afternoon sticking them in your treasury and another afternoon decorating them. This is a project that could take a few weekends or evenings, perfect for winter evenings like tonight, depending on where you are in the world. I think we might have someone here from Ethiopia, so it's probably not so cold and dark there. But once it is created, you will find that you want to keep going. And now, whenever you read a book or a poem, or hear something on an audiobook that you can note down, you will want to put it into your golden treasury. You will find yourself poring over it constantly, reading through the old passages and relishing the new ones. So that's about a treasury generally. But now I'm going to talk about a seasonal treasury. Sorry, my seasonal lipstick is slightly weird as it's actually eyeshadow. A twist on this idea is to make a seasonal version of the treasury. Divide a large scrapbook into 4 sections and label each section with a front page. Winter, spring, summer and autumn. Decorate the front page with seasonal themes. Use the colours of each season. Draw leaves or stick them in, or simply paint the whole page in one colour. Then go through your books, picking out passages that you love that relate to the different seasons. Select poems that characterise the seasons, such as To Autumn by John Keats, or Robert Frost's Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening. Then think of the books that you've read that evoke a season. Snow by Maxence Fermin, which I'm going to show you in a minute, is a beautiful book about haiku, snowflakes and tightrope walking. The Ice Palace by Tarjay Vessas is a melancholic, haunting novel about a palace of ice created by a waterfall. Tove Janssen's Moominland Midwinter gives us a Moomin troll waking up early from his hibernation and exploring the snowy world around him. All these would make lovely entries into a seasonal treasury, but of course you will have your own favourite extracts that will be perfect ones for your scrapbook. Write out whole poems, choose extracts from novels, print short stories that will fit into your book, include non-fiction if you find particularly powerful descriptions of seasons in other kinds of books, such as Touching the Void by Joe Simpson, which has wonderful descriptions of mountains in the snow. Or for the summer, look at a desert-themed book, such as The Map of Love by Abdav Soif, which will fill your mind with images of heat and sand. You can spend many happy hours creating this seasonal treasury, and every time the seasons turn, enjoy leafing through your wonderful collection of seasonal literature. So that is a really lovely thing to do yourself, or if you have children, you can encourage them to do it as well, or to do it with you. And I would urge you all, if you can, to have a seasonal treasury of books. And in a way, this lovely book, the Literary Almanac, is a bit like a kind of seasonal treasury because it's got all the beautiful illustrations, but you could do that yourself. You don't have to have someone do it for you, but you could very much be inspired by this lovely book. And it takes you through different books for different seasons. So just to talk about it for a little bit, it is a gorgeous book, curated by Francesca Bowman, and she has little extracts at the start of every month when she talks about which book she's chosen for that month. And it is done monthly. So we've got for January, for instance, The Count of Monte Cristo, because it's such a rollicking read and such a great escapist book. A lot of people talk about how they would love to read historical novels during the winter because they take you far away out of your cold and darkness into another time and place, and they can be fantastic for escapism. So books such as C.J. Sansom's Dissolution, which I'm just trying to find to show you, but I don't think I can see it at this moment, is a really fantastic novel which takes you back into the time of Henry VIII. And he's written 5 or 6 novels of that era, which are all brilliant reads, and I would agree are fantastic to read in the winter months. Another of my favourite winter reads, which is also mentioned in here, is Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, written by the Gawain poet in the 14th century with amazingly beautiful 14th century language, which is well nigh incomprehensible if you read it without a modern translation alongside. But it also sounds amazing if you read it aloud with a friend. So I would urge you to try that. Gawain and the Green Knight is the perfect winter book. Absolutely brilliant. And not too long as well. You could probably read it aloud in about an hour and a half. And it's very much takes you into a 13th century world. Then I won't go through the whole book because there's too many lovely books to talk about. But Francesca Bowman chooses books which, for various reasons, she thinks will be fantastic for that time of year. And I do agree with you. I think they all fit really well. They have, for instance, she has books that are centered on a house in April. So she has books like, here we go, Weather by Jenny Offill, Howard's End by E.M. Forster. And then that leads her to books about change, which are obviously great to read in the spring. Novels that are centered on a house like Howard's End, like The Dutch House by Anne Patchett, The Leopard by Giuseppe Tomasi de Lampedusa, Dusty Answer by Rosamund Lehman, and many more. And really, this is a joyous celebration of fantastic books to read at different times of the year. She even has The Road by Cormac McCarthy, which I think is in December, which I agree is a perfect time to read it because it is an insanely depressing, brilliant, heartrending book, which she says, gosh, how I sobbed when I finished this book. I implore you to attempt it only if you are feeling sufficiently emotionally robust, which I have to agree. You've got to be feeling robust to read that book. The Road by Cormac McCarthy, but it is a brilliant read if you are feeling like you can handle it. Colleen, great to see you. I hope that Facebook is being more successful this time. I know last time you joined me on Facebook, it was being a bit glitchy. So let me know. But I hope all is well in the world of Facebook. So that's the Literary Almanac, which is a really nice way of looking at different books to read in different seasons. She does talk about some poetry, short stories as well. And I'm now going to have a few more suggestions for different seasons myself. So let's start with winter, as we talked about autumn last week. And so I'll put on my winter hat for this moment of winteriness. If you want to know more about what books to read in autumn and you missed my last session, you can find it on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. That's Elabertu at YouTube, easy to find. And there you'll find some excellent autumnal suggestions. But for winter reads, there are the snuggly hibernating kind of reads that we've been talking about. So fat historical novels are a great idea for what to read in winter. One does sometimes have an urge to read a really big fat book, ideally by the fire or curled up in your duvet over long winter evenings. So if you can settle down with a great big fat tome in the winter, I think that's a great idea. It can be a brilliant moment to read War and Peace, for instance, or some of those amazing historical novels, such as Hilary Mantel's Wolf Hall trilogy, and so on. So winter can be a great moment to pick up a book that you might have been putting off reading because it's so long. Middlemarch, says Cyber Flaneurs. I totally agree. Winter is the perfect time to read that book. And I have met people who always read Middlemarch every winter. I also met a lot of people, meet a lot of people who love to read Jane Austen in the winter months, particularly leading up to Christmas. And actually, Francesca Bowman does mention that in her lovely Literary Almanac, that Jane Austen has all the great qualities that you need for Christmas, essentially entertainment, distraction, and a lot of wit, all generally tied up with a satisfactory ending, which is what we want at Christmas. But going back to winter generally, it's great to read some very wintry seasonal reads that are literally about winter. And one of my favourites of this season is The Ice Palace by Tarjay Vessas, who's a Norwegian writer. It's nice and short, a beautiful novella. And I think although winter reads are obviously great, the big fat tomes, it's also to read the kind of beautifully clear, precise, ice-like books which are written with a kind of prose which is like ice because it's so clear and sharp. And this is one of them. It's a really beautiful book about two girls aged 11 who form a very intense connection with each other when they meet for the first time. And one of the girls goes into the ice palace, which has formed near the village where they live in the middle of nowhere, where the waterfalls have tumbled down and created this frozen palace that you can literally walk inside. And it is an amazing, wonderful description, which I'll just read you a tiny bit of to give you an idea of what it's like. By the way, I am trying to not do such a long session tonight, so I'm going to try and keep it down to 40 minutes, just so you know. I think sometimes it's better to do a shorter session. Let me know your thoughts on that. But I think maybe sometimes an hour is a bit too long. So I'm going to read you a little bit about when one of the girls has gone into this naturally formed ice palace. Just trying to find a good place to start. Perhaps the room was not so large after all. It felt large. She didn't try to see whether she could get more answers. Instead, She looked for a way out, a means of getting further in. It did not occur to her for a moment to squeeze out into the daylight again. And she found a way as soon as she looked for it, a large fissure between polished columns of ice. She emerged into a room that was more like a passage, but was a room all the same. She tested it with a half-whispered, "Hey," and got a half-frightened, "Hey," back again. She knew that rooms like this belonged in palaces. She was bewitched and ensnared, and let what had been lie behind her. At this moment she thought only of palaces. She did not shout, "Sis!" in the dark passage. She shouted, "Hey!" She did not think about Sis in this unexpected enchantment. She thought about room upon room in a green ice palace, and that she must enter each one of them. The cold was piercing, and she tried to see whether she could make big clouds with her breath, but the light was too thin, too dim. Here the noise of the waterfall came from below. But that couldn't be right. Nothing was right in such a palace, but you seemed to accept it. She had to admit she was a little chilled and shivering in spite of the warm coat Auntie had given her when the wintry weather had set in this autumn. But she would soon forget about it in the excitement of the next room, and the room was to be found as surely as she was As might be expected in a narrow room, there was a way out at the other end. Green, dry ice, a fissure abandoned by the water. I won't go on. It's such a beautiful read, and as you can see, really nice and short. And I do think that is probably the perfect winter read. Helen is agreeing, saying she loved the Ice Palace. Hooray! I think I did talk about it last year, but it is one to go back to again and again. And another lovely wintry book is Snow by Maxence Fermin, which is another favourite. And that's similarly short, beautifully written, and about haiku, poetry, and snow. And I'd very much recommend it. It's a beautiful book to give as a gift. It looks gorgeous as well as being beautifully written. It's very romantic. And it's a perfect winter read, without a doubt. I also do love, contrary to the idea of just reading big fat tomes in winter, to read short stories, and reading them aloud with a partner or a group of friends is a great thing to do. And I do find myself in the winter months often going back to the classic short stories of J.D. Salinger. If you've never read them, they are absolutely brilliant reads. Some of the best short stories ever written. The dialogue is second to none. Really good to read aloud as well. Always surprising. Fantastically written. Great dialogue. Really good to share. And also, Italo Calvino, he is a perfect person to read in the winter. If on a Winter's Night, a Traveller is a series of short stories which are really frustratingly stopped just when they're getting exciting every time. But there is a reason that that happens, which becomes clear when you get to the end of the book. So these are also really good to read aloud. And Italo Calvino generally, I think, is a great winter read because he's quite prone to writing fairy tale like stories, such as The Baron in the Trees, which is a fantastic kind of fairy tale. And he wrote The Divided Night and many others, The Invisible Night too, I think. And they're all really great mythological sounding stories, but they're very funny and light and kind of happy reads, which are great for a winter moment. Then I'm going to have to take this off because I am literally dying of heat in my winter hat. And I'm now moving from the autumn look into the spring. So here's my spring jacket to keep you in the spring vibe. We mustn't get to summer yet because that would be rushing things forward. So spring reads. I would say in the spring it's a great time to read your reawakening kind of reads, your reads that are full of hope, positivity, starting afresh, new beginnings kind of novels. So, for instance, you could read I Capture the Castle by Dodie Smith, which is one of my favourite novels. And it is a book about new beginnings because it's also about the spring of her life. The heroine is attempting to become a writer. She is trying to capture everything that she sees and thinks about in her journal and to polish her writing skills. But it's also about her falling in love, her trying to help her father, who has a writer's block, and to really embark on life. So it's all about her new beginnings into the adult world. That's a lovely spring read. Um, Another great similar idea for a spring read is The Dud Avocado by Elaine Dundee, which is another new beginnings kind of read about a young girl who is in her early 20s, who goes to Paris, sent there by her uncle with a whole bunch of money that he gives her out of the goodness of his heart, saying, go to Paris, spend this money, have a great time, and just write me some letters and tell me about it. What a lovely idea. We all need an uncle like that. And so our heroine, Sally J. Gorse, goes off to Paris and has all sorts of fantastic adventures. Not all totally positive, but it is a kind of happy, confident, life embracing type of book. So they're great spring reads. I think spring is a lovely moment to read lighter kinds of reads, which are going to catalyze you into starting afresh, starting new things, maybe cleaning out the cobwebs of your life and beginning again. It can be a good time to read young adult novels as well. And it can be a time to read books which give you a bit of a kick towards uh, doing things that you've never done before. So I would very much recommend trying new types of books, new types of reads, and picking up maybe different genres of books too in the spring. So if you're someone that's never read science fiction, next spring that could be your moment. Or if you're someone who's never read fantasy or indeed romantic fiction, give it a go. Never say no to a different type of book. You actually never know what type is going to be tickling your fancy at a different time of year, because at different types of year we like different types of books. There's also the context of where you read. So seasonal reading, it's very important to think about the place you read. In the winter, you probably want to curl up in your duvet or curl up next to a fire or be in a lovely cozy sofa, maybe lying in a candlelit bath. Whereas in the spring, you might want to be enjoying the slightly longer evenings that you're beginning to have sitting outside in your garden, maybe after spending some time at your allotment digging bulbs. You could sit down on your chair at the end of the allotment with the smell of the fresh earth and read a fantastic book like My Name is Leon by Kit Duvall, which would be a great spring read because it's all about new beginnings as well, although it's also about adoption. And by the way, that's just been televised and will be on TV in the not too distant future. And I think it'll be great, but read the book first if you can. So then we come to summer reading, and summer is the time when actually most people do a lot of reading compared to other types in their life, other times in their life, as people often have holidays when they have more time to read. They might be camping, being in a tent, having time to read then, or they might be going off to somewhere with a beach and reading on that beach. Most of my bibliotherapy clients, when I meet them, say, I don't really get time to read except when I'm on holiday, lying by a beach, next to a pool. Summer reading is when a lot of people get their reading done. So obviously people are reading all kinds of books at that time, but beach reads are quite often a type of book that people go for, which of course can be any kind of read and can't really be categorized. But there are a lot of fabulous romantic novels which are great to read on a beach. And we can't go into all the different types of books because there isn't time. But one I did read and loved last summer was called Beach Read by Emily Henry. And that's a really fun novel about two novelists who have very different approaches to novel writing, and they happen to end up living in adjacent houses on an island off, I think, the New York coast. And they start off hating each other and have a kind of rivalry with their writing. They're both they did, as it turned out, used to know each other in their college years, and they've gone in very different directions in writing. And it's about their kind of love-hate relationship, and it's a really fun read. So that's beach reads for you in a nutshell. But summer reads really can be anything. I've had some of my best kind of more difficult reads sometimes on the beach. I read Ulysses by James Joyce on the beach, and I think it can be a great time in the summer to read more difficult stream of consciousness style books. So books like Blindness by Jose Saramago would be a fantastic beach read, I would say. And similarly, um, Duck's Newburyport, which is a kind of stream of consciousness, incredibly long novel, is another great one that I would say would be great to read on a beach because you can let the words flow over you while you lie on the beach. And that's reminding me of another book that I wanted to talk about, but did I bring it upstairs? I think I did. 1 minute, I'm just going to grab it because I can see it over in the distance. I've got a couple of books that I intended to mention, which I didn't have to hand. So here's another great beach read, Beauty Queens by Libba Bray, which is actually a kind of Lord of the Flies with models, because all these models get abandoned. Oh, Cyber Flaneurs is saying Lucy Alman is brilliant. Thanks for that. I'm glad you like it because I know a lot of people, some people find it off-putting because of its stream of consciousness style. Obviously, lots of people have also loved it, and I'm glad to see that you're one of them. Would you agree, Cyber Flaneurs, that it is a beach read? I wonder. Love to know your thoughts on that. So this one, Libba Bray, it's a kind of Lord of the Flies with models on an island where they've all crashed from their aeroplane. It's kind of mad. It's actually very funny and quite caustically written. So, but then I'm going to be slightly dotting around different seasons now with the books that I haven't mentioned previously. And Cyber Flaneurs is agreeing, thank you, that it is that the Lucy Alman Duck's Newburyport would be a great beach read. Hooray! Glad to hear that you agree. Another great summer read, Zorba the Greek, which is a great favourite of mine as well. And it is a very kind of summery book set in Greece, but it does actually have quite a lot of warfare in it too. It's by no means all light and happy, but it is a really thought-provoking book with philosophical elements, and it's all about, for me, the way it describes that life is what you make it. Life is the way that you treat things that happen to you, and Zorba the Greek responds to everything by dancing, and that's why I love him. So that's a great summer read. Then, oh yes, another one I wanted to mention, which is a kind of stream of consciousness style book, which could make it a really good one to read in the summer as well, perhaps as a beach read, is The Last Samurai by Helen Dewitt, which is a book all about a single mother and her son, And really, it's about the bond between the mother and the son, and how the son is an absolute prodigious child. And it's called The Last Samurai because the boy decides that he wants to find his father. He doesn't know who his father is, and he goes in search of a kind of ideal father, and he finds 7 different types of father. Each of one is a kind of archetype of what could be a perfect man. And he's obsessed with the film The Last Samurai, and it's a very kind of, in some ways, mad stream of consciousness book that seems to ramble and doesn't have that much punctuation, but it's absolutely brilliant and a fantastic read. So, going back briefly to winter reads, the ones that I missed out mentioning, Cold Mountain by Charles Frazier is an excellent winter read, partly because it's a historical novel, and I was talking about how historical novels are great to read in the winter, but also because it does actually have lots of really fantastic wintry scenes in it, and it's all about a man who is on a very, very long journey in a Odysseus style. It actually does have quite a lot of nods to the story of the Odyssey in it. This is a really excellent winter read, and also great to read on audio, listen to on audio. And finally, thinking of a nice, quiet, thoughtful book to read in the months between autumn and winter, like now. If people haven't yet read Leonard and Hungry Paul by Ronan Hessian, it's a really fantastic book, one of my favourite books of the first lockdown. And I sadly haven't yet read his second book, Pachenka, which I'm sure is going to be a superb one too. But if you haven't yet read this is a really lovely book to read right now, because it's such a kind of calm, quiet, and hopeful book full of the kindness of humanity. Cyberflaneurs is saying, winter reads I've loved, The Magic Mountain, which I agree would be an absolutely fantastic winter read because it's big, classic, fabulous book by Thomas Mann, which is one of those books that people often put off reading until they've got time. And I think winter is the perfect time to read that book. And Smiller's Sense of Snow, I agree. I absolutely love that book. And it does have all kinds of amazing descriptions of snow in it, which actually make you really want to celebrate snow. I did also mention this book, Wintering, last week in my autumn session, by Catherine May. And this is a kind of memoir of Catherine May's journey into kind of illness and retreat from the world. And I won't talk about it in depth now because I did last week, but that is a lovely book to read in the winter. And one last one to mention is I also think in the winter it can be a great time to pick up graphic novels, because sometimes in the winter, if you're not feeling like sitting down and reading a great big fat historical novel, then it can be a nice moment to spend a bit more time than you might normally have, because you've got the long dark evenings, poring over the pictures of a great graphic novel. And Joff Winterhart wrote this wonderful novel, and it's called Driving Short Distances. And as you can see from the pictures, he has an amazing sense of humour. He's a very, very funny writer, and I'm just going to try and show you some pictures so that you can have a look at it and see how funny it is. But he captures people and their faces absolutely brilliantly, and it's hard to describe the brilliance of this novel, but it is a book that you read and see the fantastic love that he has for humanity in all its faults and frailties, and he just captures the people really brilliantly. It's a book this one is about a boy well, a young man who hasn't really properly embarked yet on life, and he is given this incredibly boring and rather tragic job. And it's a book that will speak to anyone who's ever felt a bit lost in life and not really known what they're doing, and found themselves doing a bit of a dead end job and listening to their elders and superiors telling them how great they are and telling them lots of incredibly boring things about the job that they really don't want to know. And weirdly, even though this sounds like it's going to be a rather boring book with such subject matter, it's actually absolutely hilarious and a really fun read. Joff Winterhart came to fame about a year ago when he wrote his book The Days of the Bagnard Summer. I think he actually wrote it a few years ago, but it was made into a film, which I haven't yet seen. That book is also brilliant, and everyone says the film is fantastic, but I haven't actually seen it yet. So graphic novels can also be an exciting way to go at this time of year. And one last one to mention, a great winter read as well, A Place Called Winter by Patrick Gale, which is a lovely historical novel set in Canada, and that's literally in a place called Winter, but it does actually have all the different seasons running through it, because it's about a man starting a farm in a very barren and foreboding place in Canada, where he's come from England. He's kind of left England in disgrace because he was discovered to be gay, even though he's married with a young child. And so off he goes to start a new life in Saskatchewan, Canada. And it has a lot of really great threads running through it. But I would say it's a perfect winter read to snuggle up with fire as the wind's roaring outside. So there's quite a lot of thoughts on winter and seasonal reads, and I wonder and would love to know if you have any other favourite seasonal reads. Um, just to say, you can sponsor me if you enjoy these sessions on Ko-fi.com. You can go to Ko-fi.com and find Ella Bear too. And the idea of Ko-fi.com is that you can buy me a coffee, which is kind of a cool idea. I will continue these sessions throughout the winter. And also, if any of you have suggestions for themes, I'd love to do themes that you'd like me to do. So I'm actually thinking on a few different ideas over the next few weeks. I'm hoping to have a couple of authors joining me as well for some live sessions when I bring in some authors live on Instagram. I can't do that on Facebook, so that would be on Instagram only. And I'm thinking about doing, I've had a request from Florida to do iguanas in literature, which would be pretty fab. It might become lizards in literature. I'm also had a request from closer to home in Sussex to do lists in literature, which I think was inspired by the idea of Christmas lists. But there's a lot of amazing lists in books, which are a definite literary trope, which is really interesting. So I'm going to think about that too. And I've had another suggestion for embarrassing moments in literature, which I also think would be really fun. So if any of you have any particular desires or requests of themes that you'd like me to explore, then let me know. I just remembered I never went to the full summer experience, so this is my summer season outfit. And as I was saying earlier, summer is the time to really read pretty much anything, but also to get outside and read outside in a tree or on a swing in the park or on a boat with friends or on a picnic blanket by a river, which on which merry note I'm going to end this evening at the slightly shorter time, keeping the time a bit to a shorter level. So thanks so much for joining me again tonight. It's been lovely to see you and have all your thoughts about seasonal reading. Do send me other messages with other seasonal reads that you have, and I'll see you next week. Goodbye for now.